So what we want to look at now is another rule to find derivatives of functions, and this one's called the product rule. So seeing the word product would give you an idea that's got something to do with some multiplication, because product, multiplication, synonymous there. So as we're saying, we need more rules to solve some of our derivatives. So for example, if we look at this one, like we can expand these brackets. You can multiply the x squared by the x cubed, x squared by that one, x squared by that one, 1 by that one, then 3x by that one, and so on, and then the 2 by everything in that term. But there's a lots of terms in the brackets that becomes what we call tedious. That's really nasty and painful. There's a much easier way to differentiate those functions, and that's what we called using the product rule. Now, we use this rule when we have to multiply two functions. So our two functions are like that, but they could be any functions. And later on in the course, we're going to look at ones where we've got log or exponential functions and trig functions and even just polynomials and multiplying those. But if you've got one function and another function in terms of x, so they're two separate functions and multiplying each other, we can perform the product rule. And the way we do that is to differentiate our first one. So we get our derivative of this first one. We've got two functions, our first and our second. We differentiate the first and multiply by the second one. So you can, and then we keep the first one and multiply by the derivative of the second. So that's what we get. That's what we're getting there. And sometimes it's easier to remember this rule in words. So if fx is the first function, gfx is the second function. So derive the first times the second, and then plus the first function times the derivative of the second. So that's what the derivative function will come out as when we've got two functions multiplying by each other there. So we can either, you remember it two ways. You remember it like that or remember it in terms of words. I always prefer the words. It's just easier to be able to express it that way than the g dash and the f dash and the fx, and it's just not very pretty at times trying to remember those things. But it's up to you. How do you remember it? It's up to you. So an example here we'll start off with. We've got that example that we had before. So we derive our first. So x cubed becomes 3x squared. 4x squared gives us 8x. Derivative of 3x is 3. So that's our first bracket. Then multiply by the second bracket. Notice this stays exactly the same there. It hasn't changed. And then we take our first bracket, and that stays exactly the same. Multiply by the derivative of the second bracket, which would be 2x plus 3, because the 3x derives to 3. So there's our product rule. That's what our derivative expression looks like. It was nasty to start off with, but it doesn't look much prettier there. But that's probably the easiest you're going to get it at this point in time. So leave it like that. Don't expand it out. It's much easier to do our derivative that way. So product rule, when you have two functions multiplied by each other.